Welcome back to this Inside Story special from Cairo. In 2005, a number of pledges were made by President Mubarak to the people of Egypt. Some of these included strengthening parliaments and increasing the government's accountability, eradicating Egypt's many slums and replacing them with adequate housing, and extending the healthcare umbrella to include all Egyptians, and enhancing media freedom. Let's go back to our guests now, Rabab Al-Mahdi, Abdulaziz Al-Shadi and Manar Al-Shourbagi. Abdulaziz Al-Shadi, both ladies in the first half of the program were completely convinced that the promises weren't delivered in the past 3 years, and they were convinced that political and economic reform were both one and the same thing. What's your take on that?
Well, we are in a free country and everyone is entitled to her opinion, but my point of view is that we have to see the part of the water that exists in the glass. And I do think that in Egypt, we do have problems concerning housing, concerning health insurance, but at least we have to address the reform that took place in Egypt concerning the issue of empowering the parliament. Now, we do have the upper house in Egypt sharing power with the lower house and making legislation. And there is a committee to solve the problem between the two houses in cases of conflict of interest between the two concerning accountability. Now, the lower house has the ability to do some kind of control over the budget by discussing the budget and even moving one item from one place to another. And this is a great development concerning the issue of electing the president. We do have now an elected president. So I do think that there are some reforms. The issue is that the government and the NDP is doing it, but the opposition does not respond in the same way.
Well, let's look at one of the political...
It is very weak.
One of the opposition parties,
yes,
the Muslim Brotherhood.
It is not a party.
88
it is not a party.
It is
not a party.
Why is it banned?
It is not a party because, according to our constitution, Article 5, it is forbidden to formulate a party on the basis of religion. We are a civic nation state. And the Muslim Brotherhood...
Gauging the pulse of a lot of what's been said by the NDP while I've been here, they've been portrayed as terrorists and fanatics in many ways. Isn't that a bit unfair?
No. Look at the Muslim Brotherhood since it has been established up to now. It has been an enemy for King Farouk. It has been an enemy for Abdel Nasser. It has been an enemy for Sadat. And it has been an enemy for the current regime.
Okay, let's get Rabab to respond to that. So the Muslim Brotherhood has no place in politics, and that parliament, according to Abdulaziz Al-Shadi, is strengthened and parliament is fine at this moment in time.
I mean, I'm in no position to defend the Muslim Brotherhood per se. I would never elect them. But I think when you have such a mass-based organization, as you said, after all the rigging that happened in the parliamentary elections, they still managed to get 88 seats. That's a complete nonsense to talk about them as the banned organization. I mean, if those are the banned, who should be legalized? Isn't democracy about people reflecting their desires and what they want? Or
look
what
at the
is
Muslim
it about?
Brotherhood.
The other thing, no, we agreed that we will not. We agreed that we will not have anyone interrupt. I can interrupt you when you talk.
They recruited young generation to formulate a militia against the government in Al-Azhar. Young innocent generation being recruited to do violence. This is not peaceful participation.
This is taking us on a complete nonsense tangent. This was a photograph of young people dressed like the young Hamas recruits, and they haven't. What kind of militia? Did they find any weapons with them, and who found it, and how were they framed into it? This is complete nonsense. And the rest of the people who were put in front of a military tribunal with no charges whatsoever, all of them are civilians.
You made your point. I want to move on a little bit with Manar now and talk about a country that pushes for reform in Egypt. The United States. You can't ignore it. It's like the elephant in the cupboard. $2 billion of aid per year. First of all, where's that aid money going? And secondly, do you think the United States has eased off its pressure on Hosni Mubarak in terms of reform? since it saw groups like the Muslim Brotherhood gaining 88 seats in parliament. Maybe the US has realized that democracy is not the best thing for Egypt at this moment in time.
Well, to tell you the truth, whenever the Bush administration talked about democratization, I never bought it. I never buy this because, you know, the United States is not a charity organization. It has its own interests, and the U.S. also has its own record in Latin America and many other places, and we know it. So, and I really do not want democratization in Egypt to happen because of the American pressure. It's an insult to the Egyptian movements for change and for democratization and for all those who have struggled for democracy for years. Now the U.S. has just woke up and, you know, and discovered that this has been important. This is something that I just don't buy. So the idea that the U.S. has changed its mind on this, of course, it changed its mind after the Hamas win and the Muslim Brothers. And the reason why they were doing this pressure on the regime was that because this was the weak point of the regime. They were manipulating it to pressure the regime to do things that has nothing to do with democracy, but has to do with other regional issues and other American interests in the region. So the issue of reform, in my view, is an issue of Egyptians and by Egyptians.
All right, okay, let's talk about the state of emergency, Rabab. It's been going on for 26, 27 years. Do you feel that some Egyptians would have actually welcomed the renewal of the state of emergency, given that some anti-terror laws were on the cards? Had there not been a state of emergency, would they rather prefer a state of emergency than the new proposed anti-terrorism laws?
I mean, I can't speak on behalf, unlike other people. I cannot claim that I represent what the Egyptian masses want. But I would think, from the kind of work I do, that both, whether it's called an emergency law or an anti-terrorist law or whatever you call it, people care about the kind of treatment they get, the kind of daily systematic torture they get in police station all the time, whether they're politically affiliated or not. This has to do with the kind of police state that your report was talking about. Dr. Abdulaziz was talking about the judiciary, for example, and the kind of advantages they've been getting and the reforms they've been getting. I mean, talk to anyone from the Judges Club. See the reports that they've issued regarding how the police, the state security itself, is so infringing on their authority.
Okay, you made your point. A final question for Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Shadi. The issue of succession. Is President Mubarak's son Gamal being groomed for the presidency? Is the red carpet being laid out for him as we speak?
Well, this is a very important issue in Egypt nowadays, and it is widely talked about. You know, according to the new amendments of the Constitution, members of any political party can be nominated for being a candidate in the presidential election in the coming election. Members of the licensed political parties can hope for being a president.
So and this categorically, do you think there's a yes or a no?
The problem we have in Egypt that we have many political, but we have a multi-party system. But according to political science, we have a dominant party system. The other political parties are not strong enough nowadays. The amendments of the Article 76 that took place in 2005 opened the gate for these political parties to democratize itself from inside, but it couldn't live up to the challenge. And I do think there is a problem here, that the other political parties should do its best to reform itself, to nominate strong alternatives for the NDP. Okay. Secondly,
I've got to interrupt you because we have run out of time. I hate to interrupt you. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Rabab Al-Mahdi, Abdulaziz Al-Shadi, and Manar Al-Shurbagi. Thank you very much. It's been interesting hearing everything you had to say. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. It's been great having you with us. As always, we welcome your feedback. Email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From all of us here in Cairo, bye-bye for now.